Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little subject that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to give me a little bit of a platform to talk about one of the more talented and one of the more popular prospects in all of boxing right now, Mr. Ryan Garcia. And of course, for those of you that don't know who Ryan Garcia is, Ryan Garcia fights at the 135-pound division, also known as the lightweight division. And that is a division all in all to where it's very troubling for any of those top contenders there because any one of those top contenders could potentially lose at any time because it's such a talented division. You have a George Kambosos Jr. there. You have a Devin Haney there, a Vasyl Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis. You even have some other fighters that, in my opinion, I would not compare on the same level as those guys, like a Jojo Diaz and Isaac Pitbull Cruz. But point being is this, within those divisions, especially the 130, 135-pound divisions, those are extremely talented divisions. Teofimo Lopez, of course, was recently there, but of course, it sounds like because of his size and weight, he can no longer fight at 135 pounds. But the big question is mainly about Mr. Ryan Garcia. There are two very, very high prospects within that division, one being Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis and another one being Mr. Ryan Garcia. Those are pretty much the two most popular, maybe Vasyl Lomachenko as well. Those are pretty much the two most popular fighters at the 135-pound division. But I do believe that Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, that they are being somewhat protected by their managers. Of course, with Gervonta Tank Davis, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Ryan Garcia, Oscar De La Hoya. But the big question overall is mainly about Mr. Ryan Garcia. Because when I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, I do believe all in all that he is a real deal fighter. Just like I said with my video yesterday, when I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, he really looks overall like he has all the tools to become eventually later on the number one pound for pound king. He does all in all look like he has all those tools. There were certain people that asked me about Ryan Garcia yesterday when I released a video about him. And the reason why I wanted to do this video overall is to get my opinions about him, or at least my logical and objective analysis about Ryan Garcia out there in the open. Because this is a channel all in all to where I speak very bluntly. I'm a person all in all that, I basically call things how I see them and how I perceive things. It is what it is. I'm not a person that protects any fighters, any demographic of fighters. I'm a person all in all that is very decently logical and objective with everyone and everything. So it is what it is. But Ryan Garcia, at the end of the day, what I'll say is this, because there's been certain conversations about him, about whether he is a real fighter, a fake fighter. Is he a future pound for pound king? Is he going to be the next Saul Canelo Alvarez? Or is he overall going to be the next hype job when it comes down to it? What I'll say about Ryan Garcia is this. I don't know all in all necessarily. Well, what I'll say is this. Let me put it this way. I don't think I can necessarily call him a hype job when it comes down to, because Ryan Garcia, he really hasn't done a whole lot necessarily in his career yet, or he has not fought those real deal A-class fighters as of yet to where, I can really point out whether he's a hype job or not, because he doesn't really have any losses in his career, but he doesn't really have any A-grade wins in his career either. So you can't necessarily judge a person until overall they've been through some sort of adversity and they've been in the ring with A-grade fighters. But if you're asking my personal opinion, what is the future potential in Mr. Ryan Garcia? I think that he is a very talented fighter. I think that especially he's a very gifted athlete. He's a person all in all that, kind of like Gervonta Tank Davis. When I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia is somewhat of a natural. He is a person that has a lot of very great natural ability. I don't know if I would put his skill set quite on the level of Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, because when I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, I do truly believe that he can even potentially be one of the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the world. And of course, I can just not have Ryan Garcia on that level because I don't even think he's ever won an official belt in any weight division. But Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, is very gifted. He has excellent hand speed. He has very, very good power, maybe even A-grade power. I mean, his power, especially when I seen it in that Luke Campbell fight, he was able to hurt Luke Campbell like I've never been able to see anyone hurt Luke Campbell before in his career. And of course, the two main fighters that Luke Campbell is known of fighting before overall that Ryan Garcia fight is Jorge Linares, who I believe was the top Venezuelan fighter. I believe he's from Venezuela. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But of course, who was the former number one 135 pounder at the time before Vasyl Lomachenko got to him. And of course, the very talented Ukraine fighter, one of the greatest, talents overall today, in my opinion. And of course, one of the greatest resumes in terms of Olympic history. I believe he also has a very great, professional boxing resume as well. But of course, the loss to Teofimo Lopez does bring him down to steam a little bit. But we'll see what he does a little bit later on. But not even Vasyl Lomachenko was able to stop Luke Campbell. Ryan Garcia, he did get knocked down against Luke Campbell, but to me, that's not necessarily a big deal. I know a lot of people, they may make a big deal about it, especially the people especially with these new media and LDBC channels, who mainly overall like to go against certain demographic of fighters. Like I said, let's just be real. It is what it is. But when it comes down to it, what I'll say is this. Ryan Garcia, what he showed me in that fight against Luke Campbell, sure, he got knocked down, when it came down to it, and he showed me some flaws, but he showed that he got right back up when it came down to it, that, he never got knocked down again. I never even seen another point in the fight where he was hurt again. When it came down to it, he was able to get right back up. He was very confident, and he was able to knock Luke Campbell out. He was able to completely dominate Luke Campbell from that point on. And I got to say that does show signs overall of a very decently great boxer, but I do see some faults in Ryan Garcia's style. I think that Ryan Garcia, now someone asked me in my comment section yesterday about Mr. Ryan Garcia, do you think that Ryan Garcia will take over the throne after Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez is gone? And I assume all in all that basically what he was asking is that, is Ryan Garcia going to possibly take over as the #1 pound-for-pound spot? Or maybe he was just asking, do you think that Ryan Garcia will become the best Mexican fighter? I'm not necessarily sure. If you're talking about who I believe is going to be the best Mexican fighter, I'm not necessarily sure who that is going to be. It could be Ryan Garcia. It could be Oscar Valdez. Could be David Benavidez, even though I doubt it. I just think David Benavidez is a little bit too limited. But Ryan Garcia and Oscar Valdez, they're both very, very good fighters. It's possible that if you're talking about in terms of the best Mexican fighter, that Ryan Garcia could take over the throne. Now, if you're talking about #1 pound-for-pound fighter like a Saul Canelo Alvarez, I'm not quite sure if Ryan Garcia will ever get there. And a certain amount of people may disagree with me, but unless Ryan Garcia does make some changes in his style, I'm not sure if I see him maybe, potentially making the #1 pound-for-pound spot. Why is that? Because the main faults that I see with Ryan Garcia in that Luke Campbell fight, I see in a few. First of all, when it comes to his feet, all in all, and this does tend to be sometimes a problem, especially with that of Mexican or Mexican-American boxers, he is a little bit flat-footed. And I'm not the only one overall that mentioned that when it came down to it overall with that fight against Luke Campbell. He does tend to be flat-footed. And of course, when you're flat-footed, when it comes down to it, you're not usually going to have the quickest movement at times because you're not supposed to be on your heels. You're supposed to be on the balls of your feet overall when you box. Because basically that means that you're going to have quicker movement. Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez actually had a very big problem with that at the beginning of his career as well. But the thing is with Mr. Canelo Alvarez is that even at the beginning of his career, when maybe he would not have the greatest of feet, and I do think that it is heavily improved today, when it comes down to it, Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, he always made up for it in terms of head movement and tucking his chin down. When you box as well, you also have to tuck your chin down, and Ryan Garcia does not do that. The reason overall why he got knocked down against Luke Campbell, first of all, is because, he did not have a great defensive responsibility. Sometimes you got to keep your hands up and overall have a little bit of ring generalship. I understand what he was trying to do. He was basically trying to put his jab in his face so the punch would not land there, but sometimes that's not always going to work. You have to know when to do that and when not to do that. And at that current moment in time, because it was an overhand left, I believe, you have to cover up your hands. It just is what it is. Or you have to put your hands up towards your face, you need to put the gloves up. But when it comes down to all in all, bottom line is this. A big problem with Ryan Garcia so far that I see, he always has his chin up in the air. And you're not supposed to do that in boxing. Now, there's certain boxers that get away with it. But you're not supposed to do that all in all, because if you get hit and if your chin is wide out in the air, the probability of you getting knocked out or getting hurt or getting knocked down immediately goes up by a very, very decent percentile. So Ryan Garcia really has to learn how to tuck that chin. He has to be more defensively responsible. And on top of that, he needs to work on fighting on the balls of his feet and not being so flat-footed at times. Another fault that I also seen with Ryan Garcia is that he does not seem to necessarily have a great head movement. It's not the worst that I've seen. He will avoid punches here and there, but he is a bit straightforward. So Ryan Garcia is going to have to be careful. This is why I said in my video as of yesterday when I was talking about Ryan Garcia, I don't necessarily think that he is prepared for the elite of 135 quite as of yet. Now, if he were to get in a fight with Devin Haney or something like that, I can maybe see him potentially pulling out the match because, to be quite honest with you, I actually think that he's more physically talented than Devin Haney. I think that he's actually a better athlete than what a Devin Haney is. He may even be a more talented athlete than what a Vasily Lomachenko is, but I don't know overall if he has the complete skill set of those guys as of yet. Devin Haney, in my personal opinion, especially in that last fight against Jojo Diaz, he personally has not ever really super duper impressed me much, unless we're talking about the Jorge Linares fight, because Devin Haney is hittable, and I just don't think that he has the power to really knock out a lot of the elites at 135. But if Ryan Garcia, let's say, for example, fought Gervonta Tank Davis next, and if Gervonta Tank Davis was at 100% capacity, I don't think Gervonta Tank Davis would even allow Ryan Garcia to get past round 7 or 8. Now, I don't think that he would necessarily knock out Ryan Garcia within 2 rounds, But if Ryan Garcia is really going to stand a chance against Gervonta Tank Davis or even some of the other elites at 135, he is going to have to tighten up his skill set. Even if you don't necessarily improve the head movement as much, you need to improve the footwork, and you especially need to keep that chin tucked. It just is what it is. I think that Ryan Garcia, like I said, very, very talented. And I think that overall he is very decently talented. He's a very gifted athlete. I do think that there is some skills there. When I take a look at his timing, he has very excellent timing. When I take a look overall at his combinations, very good combination puncher. Excellent, excellent left hook when it comes down to it. Excellent right hand. Ryan Garcia is very, very talented. But this is the 135-pound division. This is not just any sort of division. This is not the division, all in all, where a lot of these fighters are extremely vulnerable. Devin Haney, all in all, is a little bit of a slickster. He can give you a lot of problems. I think that if you're asking me who overall does he have the greatest chance of beating at the 135-pound division out of any of the top contenders, it probably would be that of a Devin Haney. Maybe, George Kambosos or Vasily Lomachenko as well. George Kambosos probably as well, because George, he has very good feet and he's very fast, but he doesn't like to keep his hands up. So someone can take advantage of that, and especially with someone of Ryan Garcia's speed and power, he can take advantage of that. But the fights that I personally actually would like to see Ryan Garcia in as of next, I would actually like to see him against one of these two contenders. I would like to see him in there against either Mr. Isaac Pitbull Cruz, or I would like to see him in there against Jojo Diaz. Because in my opinion, those two fighters are going to be a little bit of a step up compared to that of a Luke Campbell. They're B-grade fighters. I don't think that they're A-grade fighters, but they're B-grade fighters. And one thing I like about both of those fighters is this. They have usually great determination. They don't have the worst punching power in the world. And they always keep their hands up. So what that means is that Ryan Garcia, more than likely, he's going to have to work off his jab. He's going to have to make sure that his chin is tucked in that fight. And that'll really tell us, all in all, in my opinion, especially if Ryan Garcia is able to look good in either one of those fights. That'll tell me if he overall is going to be a serious threat to the creme of 135. And obviously, Vasily Lomachenko, who I believe actually is a very intelligent boxer and seems to be a very intelligent person. Why do I say that he's a very intelligent person? Because Vasily Lomachenko, when I hear him, at least a boxing genius in terms, because whenever Vasily Lomachenko breaks something down in boxing, he breaks it down very incrementally, and he tells you overall why he believes things, and it usually makes logical sense. And Vasily Lomachenko, when he looked at Ryan Garcia and he said, you know what, he surprised me. Ryan Garcia, I do believe, is on the elite level. Now, maybe does he believe that Ryan Garcia is actually above that of a Gervonta Tank Davis? I'm not so quite sure of that, but what Vasily Lomachenko does see is that he does have some potential. So it is what it is. What I will say is this. Ryan Garcia, I do think that he certainly has potential, but he does need to tighten up his skill set. I don't think that he's ready for a Gervonta Tank Davis at the current moment in time. But, a fight, once again, that I would love to see next, either a Jojo Diaz or an Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Both of those fighters are defensively responsible, but I think that they're handleable enough for Ryan Garcia at this stage and point, because I don't think that he's necessarily ready for one of the A-grade fighters at this current moment in time. The athletic gifts are there, but I think that his skill set really overall needs a little bit of sharpening up. It's almost like a little bit like Deontay Wilder. And I think, don't get me wrong, Deontay Wilder, he's not on the skill set even of some of these other guys that I'm mentioning in the video. But Deontay Wilder, he was always a big, threat in the heavyweight division because, all in all, he at least had some sort of a skill set and he had that A-grade power. It's very similar with Ryan Garcia. Excellent athlete, and if he hits you, he can definitely put you in trouble. But the skill set does need some sharpening up. So we'll see, all in all, what happens. But I would love to see a fight against Jojo Diaz or that of Isaac Pitbull Cruz, because both of those fighters, first of all, it would be, two Mexicans going at it. So, of course, that'd be a very big fight, and it would do very good on the numbers when it comes down to it. I think that it would do very good for Ryan Garcia's career. Both of those fighters are coming off of decently competitive fights against two of the best at 135. So if Ryan Garcia were to look very good against them, I think that would do wonders for Ryan Garcia's career. And on top of that, like I said, Jojo Diaz and Isaac Cruz, what you notice about them is that they set up their counters pretty decently carefully. Their hands are always up when it comes down to it, and I think that's what Ryan Garcia needs in this next fight, because he needs to face a fighter, in my opinion, that is decently defensively responsible. Also has a little bit of pop in their punches when it comes down to it, and also, can fight pretty decently well. In my opinion, those two fighters next are the fighters that Oscar De La Hoya should match up Mr. Ryan Garcia with. We'll see if Ryan Garcia is going to take those fights, because Ryan Garcia has pulled out of a couple of fights within this past year. Now, one, I believe, was because of a hand injury when it came down to it, but of course another one was because of a panic attack. So we'll see, all in all, if Ryan Garcia is serious about taking some of those bigger fights. But I do like Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan Garcia is decently talented, but his skill set does need sharpening up. Because if he doesn't sharpen it up, I'm not sure overall how he's going to do against some of these other A-grade fighters. But we'll see what happens. At the current moment in time, if you're asking me, do I believe that he is a hype job? I don't have enough information right now to call him a hype job. And there's a different level of hype jobs. Many people would call, Deontay Wilder or Gennady Golovkin hype jobs. I would disagree because those fighters, in my opinion, are at least somewhat proven. Now, if you're talking about a real hype job, it depends overall what level of hype job that you're talking about. There's certain hype jobs overall that, they were actually able to become multiple weight division champions, but in my opinion, they just never lived up to the expectations. To me, that's pretty much what a hype job is. A fighter, all in all, that was so hyped up or looked at overall to be a debatable top 10 pound-for-pound fighter at one point in time, but then eventually they just pretty much lost every big fight in their career, or they just never, won any of the big fights in their career. Or maybe they never even got to that level in the first place. For example, like a David Price, for those of you that may be British, for those of you that may be British boxing fans, David Price was a person that I believe did very well in the amateurs, went to professional boxing, never became anything. So it is what it is. That's why I always say, even these guys with a very, very good amateur background, it doesn't always matter if they have a great amateur background. Sometimes, that makes great fighters like a Gamer Rigondeaux, Vasily Lomachenko, or Earl Spence Jr., or some of these other fighters. Sometimes, like a David Price, they turn out to be nothing. So it is what it is. But like I said, I don't think that he's the David Price, but the big question is, will Ryan Garcia, will he maybe become that of an Adrian Broner? Will he be someone that maybe is a multiple weight division champion or maybe wins a belt but does not necessarily win the A-grade fights in his career? Adrian Broner, in my opinion, is another person that maybe I would debate is a hype job. He was pretty much the Zab Judah of his day. A person that was so athletically gifted, but because of his low boxing IQ and all in all, because of his limited skill set, he was never able to pull out against any of the A-grade fighters that he ever fought. Whether it be Marcos Maidana or Sean Porter or Mikey Garcia, or who the hell was the other? Oh, yeah, Manny Pacquiao, an older version of Manny Pacquiao. But it is what it is. The big question about Ryan Garcia is he going to end up as another Adrian Broner? Because I don't think that he's a complete hype job like what a David Price was. But the big question overall about Ryan Garcia is he going to be another Adrian Broner? Is he going to be another Saul Canelo Alvarez? Or what is he going to be? Maybe another Miguel Cotto? Someone that is a very decently great fighter, but when he fought, the debatable number one pound-for-pound fighter or one of the top 5 guys, he didn't necessarily beat those guys, but he was still able to get some great wins in his career. I don't know necessarily what level Ryan Garcia is going to be on, and we're not really going to know that answer until he steps up in competition. And that's why, personally, in my opinion, Mr. Isaac Pitbull Cruz or Jojo Diaz, those would be perfect fights for Ryan Garcia next. Perfect. So we'll see all in all what happens. But anyways, we'll see all in all what happens. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with Mr. Ryan Garcia. I think that he is very, very talented, and I'm very excited to see where he goes next. From what I hear, he is going to be returning in March or April, and I think that it is going to be very interesting to see where he goes. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.